Michael and I did a show together in Detroit at a venue that we had played many, many years before. And we had so much fun. I was kind of embarrassed. I didn't want him to see how choked up I was at sound check. But we had toured all through the 80s, and I mean, I'm crazy about you, just as a person in general, but you know, your life gets busy, you have children, and suddenly you're hanging out with all of their friends, parents, and but to do that show last summer, we had so much fun and said, we've got to go do this again, so voila.
Well, I'm going to start at the beginning, as they say, because it's a good place to start. And I'm fascinated by the journey that artists take in their life, not just the music, but their life. And at some point in the late 70s, early 80s, a young man decided he would move to Nashville to seek his fame and fortune and see if anybody cared. But what I want to ask you this in a different way, and if I say anything incorrectly, you can correct me, but what gave you the idea that you were good enough to move to Nashville? Or
well, I certainly had a lot of optimism, and I was confident, I think, in a healthy way, because my mom and dad probably weren't anything. They just thought I hung the moon then, and they still think I hung the moon even today. And then nobody in my hometown discouraged me. They all thought I could do it. And I think once I got to Nashville and saw sort of what the competition was, I'm sure I got scared a few times. And I mean, I'll never forget walking into a couple times. I thought I had the greatest song that was ever written since the beginning of time, and was told the opposite. And I'd walk out and would be heard for maybe only 10 or 15 minutes, and sort of got my confidence back up. So I always believed that it was what I was called to do. I just didn't know the timing of it. And I think probably the hardest prayer that I ever prayed was back then when I was sort of struggling to try to kind of figure it out. Is that God, I really think this is what I'm supposed to do, but if this is not what I'm supposed to do, I'm willing for you to change my desire to do something else.
Wow. What year was it that you moved to Nashville?
1978.
78, ooh. Just what, 12, 13, just off the gun to leave home. Not that I want to, we'll ask Amy another question along that same line. When she moved to Nashville, it was...
I was 6 months old.
I thought maybe you were 0 months old when you were born there, but you actually weren't born there. She's native, basically. But in the hometown, you got a lot of encouragement, but did it dawn on you that you really knew how to play the piano? I mean, what age did the practice and the lessons really zoom, I can do this?
Well, I think when I was 15 years old, I felt like that this was a calling in my life. And, I was told I was a pretty good piano player. Now that I look back on it, I wasn't as good as I probably thought I was. And I didn't stick with the training in college like I wish I would have to some degree, but I could play by ear. I could always listen to a song, especially a pop song, and be able to play it back. So really, honestly, when I moved to Nashville, it did not happen overnight for me. I was working at a Coca-Cola bottling plant, and I was selling clothes, I was waiting tables, and I was planting shrubs, and eating a lot of bologna sandwiches. And then just remember the very first song that when I got my first songwriting contract, it was $200 a week, and I thought I died and gone to heaven. I wrote 103 songs that year. I'd say about 101 of them were horrible. But there was one song called How Majestic Is Your Name.
Wow.
From my church.
Amen.
Sandy Patty ended up cutting it, and then really, I ended up being in this Paragon Benson Publishing Company, and at that point, there was a little team of people, and they're all talking about this girl named Amy Grant, and she's going to work on a record called Age to Age. And before you know it, I found myself writing with you. It was just really at the right place at the right time. No way I could have ever orchestrated it, and that was early 81. Yeah.
Well, I first met Amy when she came to the Oakland Auditorium Theater with solo guitar. I think it was probably in the summer on a college break, because that's what you did when you were in college. You took off in the summer. I'm not sure what year that would have been. It was Springhouse promoted it, which was Bill Gaither's organization, promoted that concert. I don't know what year that would have been. Any guess?
Probably 79, 80. I was freshman or sophomore in college. So.
And so Amy's there. She sings my Father's Eyes, and I don't know if you remember the auditorium. It was a great evening. That was probably the first time you came to California. Maybe Southern California, but that was a wonderful time. And so you start doing your music career, and Amy's story is pretty neat. How she just came into it. That's what a great discussion that is. But when did you hear about this Michael W. Smith guy? And did so you were viewed as a songwriter more than a player?
I was in college in Nashville, and I was dating Gary Chapman, and you had met Gary and actually written with Gary. And Michael and I were wired very differently. If you talk to us, he always knew he was gifted and good, and I, to this day, before I walk out onto stage, go, oh dear God, I don't know if I can do this. I've always been that way, and and I think that's why I have so much fun traveling with Michael, because he's so energetic and so confident. And I mean, I'm confident that I can get up in the morning and put my clothes on and brush my teeth and all that, but the whole public side of life to me is not anywhere in my wiring. And so it was such a relief always to be with Michael, because it was just a totally safe zone. He was so far out in front, his rocket engine, his energy, I could kind of I could sort of settle in under the radar and just, But we met at Paragon Publishing, the building. It was just a couple of blocks from Vanderbilt, where I was at school, and I walked in to see if he had any song ideas that I could write lyrics to, and I was an English major, and in about 30 minutes he played pieces of most of those 101 songs, I think. I mean, I just never seen anybody that was that dynamic and just like diarrhea of ideas. And it was unbelievable. It was really energizing and exciting, and I write about 3 songs a year. And that's jet speed for me. I think about them. What's that thing I started 5 years ago? I think I'll pull that out. And I think that's why, we toured together all those years, but it was kind of a natural split for us to go different ways for a while, for a long time. It's fun to be back. We're going to write some on this tour.
So, Michael, when you started working with Amy together, was she doing okay in her career at that point, or was she still really brand new? In other words, what were you thinking, man, if I could just get with Amy and she could do some of my songs and I'd be on my way? I mean, or is the timing off? Am I off on the timing?
I think she didn't mind me talking about her. I mean, I think she was sort of the new, fresh thing, and everything was, up to that point, other than, the Randy Stonehills and Larry Normans. I don't know if there was for lack of a better word, a pop diva, a girl doing pop music and talking about her faith, and there was just a lot of buzz on this girl named Amy Grant. I knew her from just my father's eyes, but what I'd heard, I was very intrigued, and then I was so honored to be able to be asked to. I don't know if I was asked or if I just sort of barged my way in, but wrote 3 songs on the Age to Age record, and then from then on, I started touring. In the spring of 1982, I think I was the MD, or I was somewhat the musical director. And then in the fall of '82, I cut a project in August and September, and then I opened up. If you saw that tour in 1982, that's when I was at the high peak of being so hyper. I made people dizzy going back and forth around that. And then we ended that tour in the fall of '82 with Friends. Amy sang Friends, and I sang harmony with her. And then that project record was released in February of 1983. 3, and then we continued to we did the Straight Ahead tour, I guess, after 8 Stage. So the big tour was Lead Me On, which if you look at the shirt out there, we sort of like, you know, there are so many shows. I don't know how we even feasibly did what we did. I mean, from 87, end of 87 in England all the way to 89, we did the Lead Me On tour, which is the biggest tour that I've ever been a part of, actually. And that I have a lot of great memories from that tour. So this is the first time we really honestly toured together in a pop sense since 89, if I'm not mistaken. We've done Christmas tours together. We did a big thing for the Nashville Symphony, which really was supposed to be only for Nashville, but ended up taking it on the road. But this tour tonight is the first tour in 22 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Amy, as the years progressed and you went from through the albums and they became more popular and the concerts got larger and the airplay started to happen, those kind of things, and your profile went up, did you start to feel a certain amount of pressure that, I mean, if you can remember at that age, but they're asking me to carry too much, and I meant as a spokesperson for Christian music or as the #1 artist, did that start to bother you, or remember anything about your feelings toward that?
Well, it was a lot of fun. I remember that. Lead Me On was kind of a serious record, and it had followed kind of a serious season for me, a regrouping, and then after all of that touring, I had my second child, Millie, and we were really just doing, for all of you that have ever been a mom of young kids, all you really do with toddlers is dance. And so I was always trying to write things that would make my little babies dance. And that propelled the early 90s success. But I had a great church, a great family. You know, I'm sure I did some stupid things, not nearly as stupid as the stuff I would do later, but I don't think that I ever really thought about people looking, and that's probably just because of the way I'm wired. I'm nearsighted, and I think that from the time I was a kid, I always focused on what was right in front of me, and not ever thought that anybody was looking. And I just think that oblivion kind of carried me through those success years.
I think you were the first person I'd ever known that had LASIK surgery. I remember at the Concord Pavilion, you telling me about your surgery. Is that right? And that would have been in 84 or 85.
Yeah, it was before,
and we had never heard of this before, and you can get your eyes fixed where you can see him. That's wild.
Mine didn't work out so great. It was with the blade before. I know. But I wanted to do that before I had children, because I was afraid if my house ever caught on fire, I couldn't get them out. And so I did that, and at one time, it was worth it all for one time, when I was in a huge pool, and I recovered enough vision to see that there was a child that was under the water for I couldn't figure out what was going on, and just swam as fast as I could. It was at a resort, as fast and hard as I could, and it was my child who had fallen in and was not big enough to get out. And I thought, well, that was just worth all that, so.
I guess so.
There you go.
I guess so. And then I remember, speaking of eyes, I don't know why I'm thinking of that, but you had an eye emergency surgery later, and I was looking through my concert records a couple of days ago, and I think I had to cancel one of the shows because you had that surgery, but I think so. You were kind of in the middle of everything, and all of a sudden, how's it going now? How many fingers?
4. My nickname has always been Helen Keller, just for obvious reasons.
Well, Michael, someone who didn't write their name on their card, so I can't give them credit for this. Actually, Julie Graves from White Salmon, I think is who it is, asked, what do you see, or what would you have been had you not been a singer-songwriter musician? Any idea what you What was your backup plan?
Yeah, I was, my childhood was a bit unique because not only was I a musician, but I was an athlete. I was a bit of a jock, and my desire was to play professional baseball. And I wanted to play for the Cincinnati Reds. And then got to 15 and didn't make the All-Stars, and my passion really changed from swinging the bat to playing the piano. And now that I look back on it, I probably wasn't good enough to be a professional baseball player, although my dad would say otherwise. all the guys and my dad's friends in my hometown of Canova, West Virginia. But I would say that if I had to choose something, I think that if I wasn't doing music, I would be involved somehow in youth ministry because I love kids. I still love kids to this day, and maybe that's a big part of why I have Rocketown. It's the teen club in downtown Nashville, and especially have a heart for the disenfranchised kid, the kid who has a very really tough and not a normal childhood. And so if I had to leave today, if I had to quit, I would maybe I'd just go be on staff at Rocketown.
So you're a big baseball fan.
San Francisco.
Yeah.
And what were you doing in mid-October in 1989?
Yeah, that's a trip, isn't it?
Yeah, but I don't think most people know what you were doing.
Well, I was on the Idaho tour, and I had 2 days off, and I was scheduled on my 2 days off to go to LA and be a part of, which I think you were too, the Lou Rawls special, telethon special. And then after doing that, I was to fly up and meet my good friend, who's a pastor to musicians named Michael Guido, my Italian friend. And strangely enough, on that third game, if I'm not mistaken, of the World Series, there were two friends of mine, personal friends, that were pitching for the Oakland A's and the Giants. Storm Davis for the Oakland A's and Donnie Robinson for the Giants, who Donnie and I went to school together. He was a year ahead of me. So I thought that was so odd. But we'd gotten very close to Storm, and so Storm invited me, and I brought Guido. And so I remember we were on our way to the park and thought it was a very strange day because the wind wasn't blowing in San Francisco. And Guido, my friend, who's extremely, he prays all the time. And we were late for the game, so he was praying that God would hold up the game. So we got there, so we're in this cab, and then we start to pull up this light, and all of a sudden the telephone calls started going, and the car started rocking, and the lights swinging, and Guido's back there going, "Thank you, Jesus! Hold up the game!" And the radio went dead, and it got quiet, and I'll never forget the driver turning, because we were only 5 minutes from the park. He turned around and said, "Guys, that was a big one." And we actually went on and got to the park, walked into the park, and watching everybody stand up and everybody's with all their little, Walkman TVs or whatever, I knew that we were not going to be playing baseball that day. And to actually walk onto the field and be there with Storm and Donnie, and knowing that this is what I want to do my whole life, and here I am on a historical day when there's not going to be a baseball game. We've had honestly a horrific day for many people. A lot of people were killed, very sad. And I got out of there somehow. It's a miracle because all the flights were canceled, and I had a show in Kansas City the next day, and we were up all night after shocks, and then got a call from Dave Slaughter, and said there's a flight. It was like 6:05. He said there's a flight at 6:55. It's the only flight leaving LAX, and it's from LAX to Kansas City.
Wow.
And so. I remember when I got off the plane in Kansas City, we were the first flight out, and there were 30 or 40 cameras wanting to interview us, not because of my concert, because they wanted to hear firsthand what the experience was. So that's my earthquake story, 1989.
Wow.
And I don't know if you may not remember this, but I was promoting a concert with you that month at the Oakland Auditorium Theater or Arena, and we had pretty good ticket sales. About 10 days after the earthquake, an usher guy calls me and says, "John, do you know that the building is shut down, red tagged?" And I go, "No, I didn't know that." The building didn't call me and tell me that their water pipes were broken. They couldn't have the concert there within about a week later when we were supposed to have the concert. So we moved the concert to Berkeley, to the Berkeley Community Theater, in some kind of crazy manner, and then I turned all the seats. Okay, we had the blue section, the green section. If you had any kind of reserve seat here, you sit in the blue section, and we had a pretty successful concert at the Berkeley Community Theater. I eye to eye? Yeah, that time. Amy, someone asked, what were your musical influences growing up, or maybe even still today, or particularly growing up or in your teens and such?
I'm the youngest of 4 girls, and so I got to borrow all of my older sister's records. I really cut my teeth on Joni Mitchell, Judy Collins, James Taylor, Aretha Franklin. I said Carole King, right? Carole King.
Mm-hmm.
Early Elton John. Of course, we had a lot of Elvis, a lot of Beatles, Three Dog Night, Jethro Tull. All that was in the house, but what I loved were the singer-songwriters.
That was Bill from Salinas asked that question. Michael, how about you? Who was your influence?
On the pop
Favorites?
side, it was the Beatles and Elvis as well, and I was a big fan of early Elton John records. Still not the same, you know. I mean, I'm still an Elton fan, but the Yellow Brick Road was one of my favorite. Billy Joel, Kansas, Left Overture, Mask. I also was into Larry Norman and Randy Stonehill, and Andre Crouch and the Disciples.
Woohoo.
Yes.
Let's see, Ken Raines asked, with all the public attention through all these years and all that sort of thing that comes with that, how do you stay grounded, Amy, or focused?